The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was older than most civilizations. Its walls were made of living crystal that had grown slowly over 40,000 years. Each layer recorded the memories of those who had walked these floors. Emperors had stood here, warlords had knelt in surrender, treaties that saved. Billions of lives had been signed on the ancient stone table at the center of the room. Today, the 12 seats of the Elder Council were filled with beings that looked nothing like each other. Some had scales, some had feathers, some were made of pure light. One was a massive creature of living stone whose body glowed with inner fire. Another was so small that it sat in a special floating chair just to be seen by the others. At the head of the table sat the oldest of them all, the Lethori. Representative had no name that other species could pronounce. Its body was made of crystal that had been growing for 10,000 years. It moved slowly. It spoke rarely, but when it did speak, everyone listened. About the young ambassador from the Dominion did not understand why everyone treated the Lith with such respect. To him, the ancient being was just a relic of a past age, a fossil that had somehow learned to talk. Ambassador Kithari was considered young. By his people's standards, he had lived only 200 years. His scales were still bright blue, not yet faded to the gray of old age. His eyes were sharp. His mind was sharper. He had risen through the ranks of violin politics faster than anyone in 5 generations. He had done this by being bold when others were cautious, by taking risks when others played it safe. The old ways, he believed, were holding his people back. The vile Anxi Dominion controlled 40 star systems. They had the 3rd largest military in the galaxy. They should be expanding, growing, taking what they deserved, but the elders kept talking about caution, about balance, about the old warnings. Keith Vari had come to the Concord today to request permission for a mining operation. The moon called. Vesper 7 sat in unclaimed space. Its rocks were rich with valuable minerals. The vile NX wanted it. There was only one problem. A human colony had been there for 60 years. The humans have no legal claim to Vesper 7, Kithvari said. To the council, they settled there without permission from the Concord. They have ignored 3 requests to relocate. I'm asking for authorization to remove them. The council members looked at each other. Some of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Though the Thor spoke, its voice was like stones grinding together, slow and heavy. You wish to move against the humans. I wish to move against illegal settlers on unclaimed territory. Cathari corrected. Their species is irrelevant. Their species, the Lethori said, is very relevant. The ancient being raised one crystal in arm. The air in front of Kether is shimmered, and a book appeared. It was not a real book, just a projection, but it looked old. Its pages were yellow. Its cover was worn. Book of Cautions, the Lether said. It contains warnings passed down from the first members of the Concord. Warnings about species too dangerous to engage. Entry 7412. Read it. Kevari looked at the floating book with barely hidden contempt, but he read the entry aloud. Humans observe only, never provoke, never threaten what they protect. They are patient until they are not. He closed the book with a wave of his hand. With respect, Elder. This warning was written thousands of years ago. The humans of that era were primitive. They had barely left their home planet. Today they are a minor Species with modest technology, they have no psionics, no natural weapons, they live short lives and reproduce slowly, they are not a threat, they are not a threat. The Lethari repeated slowly, because no one has threatened them in a very long time. This is not an accident. Another council member spoke up. It was the ambassador from the Kredak swarm, a species of insect-like beings who shared a group mind the humans trade peacefully with. All members of the conquered, they cause no trouble, they ask for little. Why would you risk disturbing this balance over a single moon? Because balance is another word for stagnation, Cathari replied. The humans have grown comfortable, they believe they can settle wherever they wish, ignore all laws and face no consequences. If we allow this, others will follow their example. The authority of the conquered will mean nothing. The council debated for 3 hours. In the end, they reached a compromise. Cathari would be allowed to send a diplomatic mission to Vasperus 7. He would offer the humans fair compensation to relocate. If they refused, the matter would return to the council for further discussion. Kithvari agreed to these terms. He had no intention of following them. The diplomatic ship arrived at Vasperus 7 2 weeks later. It carried no diplomats. It carried military officers who delivered a simple message: leave within 30 days or face the consequences. The humans of Vesper 7 sent a reply. They had been on this moon for 60 years. They have built homes here, raised children here, buried their dead here. They would not leave. Keith Vari received this message in his private chambers on the Volxi home world. He smiled as he read it. The humans had given him exactly what he wanted, a reason. He called a meeting of his military advisors. The humans have refused to comply with a lawful order. He told them, they have left us no choice. Prepare a strike force. We will give them a demonstration of what happens to those who defy the Dominion. One of his advisors, an older officer named Verthan, raised a concern. Ambassador, the council authorized only diplomatic contact. An attack would violate our agreement. The council authorized me to resolve this situation. Cathari replied, that is what I am doing. The elders live in the past. They are afraid of their own shadows. The humans are nothing. A firm hand now will save us years of trouble later. And if the humans retaliate, Keith Vari laughed. With what? Their cargo ships there. Mining equipment. The humans have no military presence in this sector. They have no allies who will fight for them. They are alone, weak and far from home. By the time anyone learns what happened, it will be over. G-Tham wanted to argue more, but he could see it was pointless. The ambassador had made up his mind. All the old soldier could do was follow orders and hope that the ancient warnings were, as Kithvari believed, just superstition. The strike force arrived at Vesper 7 on a quiet morning. The human colony below was just waking up. Children were getting ready for school. Farmers were heading out to check the agricultural dumps that provided food for the settlement. It was an ordinary day. Then the sky filled with fire. The Vladic sea ships targeted the agricultural domes first. These were the structures that kept the colony alive. Without them, the humans could not grow food. They would be forced to evacuate or starve. But the strikes were not precise. They were not meant to be. Kavari had ordered a demonstration of resolve. his commanders, understood what this meant. They were sending a message. Messages needed to be loud. The first dome exploded in a ball of flame. The second followed moments later, then the third, the fourth. The humans on the ground ran in panic, trying to reach shelters that had never been designed to withstand orbital bombardment. A school building took a direct hit. It had been built near one of the agricultural domes, close enough to be caught in the blast radius. 47 children died in an instant. They never knew what was happening. They never had a chance to be afraid. The bombardment lasted for 1 hour. When it was over, the Velexi ship scanned the surface. 60% of the colony's infrastructure was destroyed. Casualty estimates were still coming in. Final count would be 3,247 dead, among them 847 children. Cathvari received the report with satisfaction. The demonstration had been effective. The surviving humans would surely evacuate now, and other species watching would understand that the Valenixi dominion was not to be trifled with. He sent a message to the council, informing them that the situation on Vasperus 7 had been resolved. He did not mention the details. By the time they learned the truth, it would be too late to do anything about it. But the council learned faster than he expected. The humans had sent a distress signal during the attack. It had been received by a Kredak trading vessel passing through a nearby system. The Kredak, true to their nature, had shared the information with everyone. Within hours, the entire galaxy knew what the Valenixi had done. The council convened an emergency session. Katvari was ordered to appear and explain himself. He did so with confidence, standing before the 12 elders without any sign of shame or regret. The humans were given every opportunity to leave peacefully. He said they refused. The consequences of that refusal are their own responsibility. You killed children, the Kredak ambassador said. You bombed a school. Unfortunate, Cathari admitted, but necessary. The humans needed to understand that we were serious. They understand now. The chamber fell silent. The elders looked at each other with expressions that Cathari could not read. Finally, the Lethori rose from its seat. Its crystal body creaked with the movement. It walked slowly toward the exit. Where are you going? Cathari demanded. This session is not over. The Lethori stopped. It turned its head to look at the young ambassador with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. When spoke, its voice was heavy with something that might have been sadness or pity. This session is very much over, the ancient being said. You asked me earlier why we fear the humans. You will learn the answer soon. Enough. I have no desire to watch. It continued toward the exit. At the door, it paused one final time. Entry 7412 was not written by the first conquered. The Lethori said it was written by the survivors of the second conquered, the one that existed before us, the one that made the same mistake you have made. What happened to them? Kivari asked. The Lethori did not answer and simply walked out of the chamber, leaving silence behind. The other elders followed one by one. None of them spoke. To Kethvari, none of them looked at him. They simply left as if the matter was already settled, as if there was nothing more to discuss. Kethvari stood alone in the great hall of the Galactic Concord. He told himself that the elders were fools, cowards, slaves to ancient superstitions that had no basis in reality. The humans were a minor species. They had no army, no fleet, no weapons that could threaten the Dominion. They would grieve for their dead, file protests that would go nowhere, and eventually accept that they could not fight back against a superior power. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong took what they wanted, the weak learned to accept it. Kadvari returned to his home world as a hero. The news broadcast praised his decisive action. Young Velixi looked up to him as a leader who was not afraid to do what was necessary. His political rivals were silent, unable to criticize someone so popular. He was certain that he had made the right choice. The humans would fade into history as a cautionary tale about what happened to those who defied the Galaxy Dominion. He was wrong. In the human territories, millions of light years away, the news of Vesper 7 spread like wildfire. Every human in the galaxy learned what had happened. They saw the images of burning domes. They heard the names of the dead. They watched videos of children's belongings scattered in the rubble, and something changed. It was not a dramatic change. There were no angry speeches, no calls for immediate revenge, no protests in the streets. Humans did not react the way other species expected them to react. They simply grew quiet. Factories that had been producing consumer goods began producing something else. Scientists who had been working on medical research changed their focus. Engineers who had been designing better starship engines started designing something different. And across human space, people who had never met each other, who had no central leadership telling them what to do, came to the same conclusion independently. The Violini had killed their children. This would not stand. The response was coming. It would not be fast. It would not be emotional. It would be patient, thorough, and complete. The humans had a saying passed down from their earliest history: revenge is a dish best served cold. The Valency were about to learn what that meant. 3 weeks passed after the attack on Vaspera 7. Ambassador Kithvari waited for the humor response. Every morning he checked the intelligence reports. Every evening he asked his advisors the same question: what are the humans doing? The answer was always the same: nothing. No diplomatic protests had been filed. With the galactic conquered, no military ships had been detected moving toward Velini space. No angry messages had been broadcast across communication networks. The humans had simply gone silent. At first, Kathvari was confused. He had expected something: angry words at least, perhaps economic sanctions, maybe even a symbolic attack on some minor Valeni outpost. These were the normal responses of a species that had been wronged. These were the responses he had prepared for, but silence. This made no sense. After a month, confusion turned to satisfaction. The humans, he decided, were simply too weak to respond. They had looked at the power of the Volanaxi Dominion and realized they had no chance. They were accepting their defeat with quiet dignity. Kithvari called a press conference. He stood before the cameras with a proud smile on his face. The situation with the human colony has been resolved, he announced. The illegal settlers have been removed from Vaspera 7. More importantly, we have sent a message to the entire galaxy. The Velini Dominion will not be ignored. We will not be disrespected. We will take what is rightfully ours, and anyone who stands in our way will face the consequences. He paused, enjoying the attention. Some have asked about the human response. I will tell you what the human response has been: nothing, silence, acceptance. The humans have learned their place in the galaxy. They understand now that they are not our equals. They never were. The broadcast was watched across the galaxy. Many species were shocked by Kethvari-ass arrogance. A few were impressed by his boldness, and in the human territories, millions of people watched with faces that showed no expression at all. Thought the old soldier Verthan watched the broadcast from his office in military headquarters. Unlike his ambassador, he was not satisfied by the human silence. He was worried by it. Verthan had studied human history. He had read about their wars, their conflicts, their long climb from primitive beginnings to space travel. He knew things about humans that Kethvari had never bothered to learn. Humans were not a passive species. They did not accept defeat quietly. Throughout their history, they had fought against odds that seemed impossible. They had faced enemies stronger than themselves and found ways to win. They were creative. They were stubborn. They were patient. Most importantly, they were very, very good at holding grudges. The silence did not mean the humans were giving up. It meant they were planning. Verthan tried to explain this to Kethvari. The ambassador laughed at him. You have been reading too many old books. Keith said the humans of ancient history were different. They were warriors fighting for survival. The humans of today are soft. They have lived in peace for too long. They have forgotten how to fight. Or perhaps they have learned something better than fighting. Farron suggested perhaps they have learned how to wait. Kethvari waved his hand dismissively. Wait for what? They have nothing. No weapons that can match ours. No fleet that can challenge ours. Time is not their ally. Every day that passes, we grow stronger. Every day they grow weaker. The longer they wait, the worse their position becomes. Varen said nothing more. He could see that arguing was pointless. All he could do was watch and wait and hope that his fears were wrong. 2 months after the attack, something strange began to happen. Human commercial ships started leaving ports across the galaxy, not in a panic, not in a rush, just quietly, steadily. One by one, a human freighter captain told his Kredak trading partners that he was taking a holiday. He would be back in a few months. A human engineer working on a space station requested leave to visit family. She was not sure when she would return. A human scientist participating in a joint research project announced that personal matters required his attention elsewhere. None of these departures seemed connected. They were all explained by normal reasons, but when you added them up, a pattern emerged. Within 60 days, not a single human remained outside human territory. This fact was noticed by very few. The humans had always been a small presence in the wider galaxy. A few traders, a few scientists, a few engineers whose skills were valued. Their absence was barely felt by most species, but the elders noticed. The Lither representative, still recovering from the shock of Kethar's actions, called a private meeting of the senior council members. They gathered in a small chamber far from the main hall. No records were kept of their discussion. The humans are withdrawing, the Lithori said. All of them. Everywhere. Perhaps they are afraid, suggested the Moric ambassador. Creature of living flame, perhaps they are hiding. Humans do not hide, said the Kredak representative. Our traders have worked with them for centuries. When humans are afraid, they become aggressive. When they are angry, they become quiet. They are very quiet, right? Now what does that mean? The Mora gas. The Lethari answered, it means they are not retreating, they are clearing the field. The other elders looked at each other with growing concern. Clearing the field for what? The Morik pressed for whatever comes next. The Lethari projected a data display into the air. It showed information gathered from various sources across the galaxy. Human industrial output had increased by 4,000%. Human shipyards, which had been operating at minimal capacity for generations, were now running constantly. Mining operations had expanded to every rock and asteroid in human space, and there was one more piece of data that the Lethari highlighted: human birth rates. The ancient being said they have been stable for 300 years, 2 children per family. On average, enough to maintain their population but not to grow it significantly. The display changed to show current statistics. In the 2 months since Vaspera 7, the average has jumped to 4 children per family. In some regions it is higher. Human women who had decided not to have children are changing their minds. Human men who had planned to wait are starting families. Now why the Moricast? What does reproduction have to do with military action? The Kredak understood. The insect species lived in collective groups where reproduction was tied directly to survival strategy. They are preparing for a long campaign. Kredak said they are making sure that even if many of them die, their species will continue. They are expecting losses, heavy losses, their own losses. The Moragic asked, or someone else's? The Lethari replied, we cannot know which, but we can know this: whatever the humans are planning, they believe it will be costly. They are preparing to pay that cost. The elders sent this information to Cathari. They urged him to seek a diplomatic solution while there was still time. They offered to help negotiate a peace agreement. They warned him that the situation was more dangerous than he realized. Cathari dismissed their concerns as cowardice. The birth rate increase was easily explained by emotional reactions to the tragedy. The industrial expansion was probably just economic adjustment. The departure of humans from galactic space was simple fear. Everything had a rational explanation. He sent a message back to the council that was polite in words but mocking in tone. He thanked them for their concern. He assured them that the Valnixi Dominion had the situation under control. He suggested that the elders might benefit from focusing on matters within their actual expertise. The Lithe read this message and felt something it had not felt in 3,000 years: fear. Meanwhile, in human space, something extraordinary was happening. Humans were not like other species. They had no central government that told everyone what to do. They had no hive mind that coordinated their actions. They were individuals, each with their own thoughts and desires and plans, and yet without anyone giving orders, without any grand strategy being announced. They were all moving in the same direction. Factories that made toys began making precision components. Farms that grew food began growing the raw materials for medicines and stimulants. Universities that taught art and Literature began teaching engineering, and physics, entertainment companies began producing training simulations. No one told them to do this, no law required it, no leader demanded it. They simply did it because it needed to be done. A human philosopher once wrote that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to cooperate without coordination. Other species needed leaders and orders and strict hierarchies. Humans could look at a problem, understand what needed to happen, and work together without being told. This was happening now on a scale that had never been seen before. In shipyards across human space, engineers worked around the clock. They were not building ordinary ships, they were building something new, something that had never existed before. The designs came from 1,000 different minds. One engineer in one system had an idea for a better engine. Another engineer in another system had an idea for a better hull. Third had an idea for a weapon system. And fourth had an idea for stealth technology. These ideas flowed together like rivers joining to form an ocean. Within weeks, the humans had designed ships that were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were small, much smaller than the massive warships that other species built. They were fast, faster than anything else in space. They were quiet, so quiet that sensors could barely detect them, and they were being built by the thousands. All Val-Nexi intelligence agents, the few who still had contacts in human space, sent back reports that were met with disbelief. The numbers could not be right. No species could build so many ships so quickly. The sensors must be malfunctioning. The data must be wrong. For them read these reports and felt cold fear settle in his heart. He requested a meeting with Kethvari. The ambassador agreed, but his attitude made clear that he considered it a waste of time. The humans are building a fleet, Verthan said, a large fleet, larger than anything they have ever had. So Kethvari replied, let them build. What can they do with it? Attack us. Our defensive systems are the best in the galaxy. Our ships are larger, more powerful, more numerous. Even if the humans throw everything they have at us, they will break against our walls like waves against rock. What if they don't attack directly? For then asked, what if they do something we don't expect? Keith Vari laughed. Like what? Humans are predictable. They are emotional. They will come at us with anger and fury, and we will crush them. That is how these things work. These humans have been quiet for 3 months, Varen pointed out. There has been no anger, no fury, only silence and preparation. That is not emotional, that is calculated. Then they will come at us with calculation, and we will still crush them. The mathematics are simple. We have more ships, we have bigger ships, we have better weapons. Nothing they humans can build will change that equation. Orthan had one more thing to say. He had saved it for last because he knew it was the thing most likely to be dismissed. There is something else, he said, something that worries me more than the ships. What? The humans are smiling. Kithvari blinked, smiling. Our agents in human space report that humans are going about their work with expressions of happiness. They are not angry, they are not sad. They are smiling. They look at each other with understanding. They share small jokes. They seem almost excited. Perhaps they are simply a cheerful species. They are not. Humans show negative emotions freely. When they are hurt, they show When they are grieving, they show it, but when they are truly dangerous, they smile. It is how they prepare themselves for violence. They tell jokes to calm their nerves. They smile to hide their fear. They laugh to convince themselves that everything will be fine. For them leaned forward, our agents say. They have never seen so many humans smiling everywhere they go. Every human they see smiling, laughing, joking, as if they are all sharing the same secret, as if they all know something that we do not. For just a moment, Kathvari felt a flicker of doubt, but he pushed it aside. You are imagining things, he said. The humans are weak. They have always been weak. Nothing has changed. Varen left the meeting knowing that nothing he said would make a difference. The ambassador had made up his mind. He would believe in human weakness until the moment the belief killed him. That moment Breathin suspected was coming. Soon, in human space, the preparations continued. Ships were built, weapons were tested, plans were refined, and everywhere humans went about their work with quiet determination and small, secret smiles. 6 months after the attack, on Vesper 7, everything was ready. Humans had not forgotten. They had not forgiven. They had simply been patient. And now their patience was about to end. The morning began like any other on the Valency home world. The twin suns rose over the capital city. Government workers made their way to their offices. Military officers checked in at their posts. Ambassador Kathvari ate breakfast in his private residence, reviewing the day's schedule on his data pad. Then everything stopped working. It happened all at once. Every light went dark. Every screen went blank. Every ship in orbit went silent. Every weapon on every military base across 40 star systems powered down at exactly the same moment. Kathvari sat in sudden darkness, his breakfast cooling in front of him. For a long moment he did not understand what was happening. Power failure, but the backup system should have activated immediately. An attack, but there had been no warning, no alert, no enemy ships detected. He reached for his emergency communicator. It was dead across the Valency Dominion. Billions of people experienced the same shock. Military commanders found themselves standing on ships that would not respond to commands. Pilots sat in fighters that would not fly. Gunners stared at weapons that would not fire. Communication officers spoke into systems that transmitted nothing. The entire military infrastructure of one of the galaxy's great powers had been turned off like a light switch, and no one had seen it happen for 3 hours. The Valency existed in darkness and silence. There was no way to communicate, no way to understand what was going on. People gathered in the streets, looking up at the sky, waiting for something to happen. Then the power came back. Lights flickered. On screens activated. Communications resumed. Ships hummed back to life. For a moment there was relief. The crisis was over. Whatever had happened, it had passed. Then the military began testing their systems. Gunner on a battleship tried to fire a test shot from a plasma cannon instead of a deadly blast of superheated energy. Beam of harmless colored light emerged. Pretty decorative, completely useless. Pilot tried to accelerate his fighter to combat speed. The engines engaged, but the ship moved slowly, barely faster than a cargo transport. He pushed the throttle to maximum. The ship did not respond. An engineer on a space station ran a full diagnostic on the defensive systems. Everything appeared normal, everything registered as operational, but when he tried a live test, nothing worked correctly. Weapons fired light shows, shields operated at a fraction of their rated strength. Engines produced a tenth of their normal power. Reports flooded into military headquarters from across the Dominion. Every ship, every station, every weapons platform, every piece of military technology had been altered, not destroyed, altered, made harmless. 4. Then read these reports with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. He had warned them. He had told them the humans were dangerous. No one had listened. Now they would all learn together. How is this possible? Kavari demanded when he finally reached military headquarters. How could they do this to every system at once? They would have needed access to every ship, every base, every piece of equipment. They had access, said quietly. That's impossible. Our security is the best in the galaxy. Apparently not. Keith grabbed the old soldier by his uniform. His scales had gone pale with fear and rage. You knew this was coming. You warned me. How did you know? But then removed the ambassador's hands with careful firmness. I did not know what they would do. I only knew they would do something. The humans have been preparing for 6 months. They withdrew all their people from the galaxy. They built ships in numbers we could not believe. They smiled and laughed and shared secret jokes. He gestured at the reports still streaming in. Now we know what the joke was. They were already here. They were already inside our systems. They had been for months, perhaps years, waiting, watching, learning every weakness. And when they were ready, they simply reached out and turned us off. But no one detected them. Keith Vari protested. Our sensors never reported any intrusion. Our sensors also never detected them leaving. Furtham pointed out. Think about that. Thousands of human ships entered our space, moved to our territories, accessed our most secure facilities, and left again. And we saw nothing. We knew nothing. The only reason we know they were here at all is because they wanted us to know. Before Kethvari could respond, a new alert flashed across every screen in the headquarters. A broadcast was being transmitted on all frequencies. Every communication device in the Dominion was receiving it. A single human ship had appeared at the edge of Valnixy space. It was small, unimpressive, completely unremarkable. It looked like a civilian transport, the kind of vessel that carried cargo between systems, but this vessel carried a message. The broadcast began with an image, a child's shoe, small and worn, covered in dust and ash. It had been recovered from the rubble of Esper 7. It had belonged to a girl named Emma, who had been 7 years old when she died. Then a human voice spoke. It was calm, patient, completely without emotion. The Valnixy Dominion killed 3,247 of our people on the moon called Vaspera 7. Among the dead were 847 children. The youngest was 3 months old. The oldest was 17 years. They were students, farmers, engineers, artists. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters. They had done nothing wrong. They were killed because one ambitious politician wanted to prove that human lives meant nothing. The voice paused. We are here to prove otherwise. The image of the child's shoe faded. It was replaced by a list of names, all 3,247 of them. They scrolled slowly across the screen, each one displayed for a moment. Before moving on, for each life taken, we will extract 1 year of penance from the Valency Dominion. That is 3,247 years. Your grandchildren's grandchildren will still be paying for what you have done. The scrolling names continued. You have already experienced the first stage of this penance. Your military has been rendered ineffective. Your weapons are toys, your ships are slow, your defenses are weak, you are helpless. Another pause. This is not vengeance. Vengeance would have been faster. Vengeance would have been a fleet arriving in your space and burning your worlds the way you burned ours. We could have done that, we chose not to. The names kept scrolling. Emma, age 7. Marcus, age 12. Sarah, age 5. David, age 16. Instead, you will live. You will live knowing that you are alive only because we permit it. You will live knowing that at any moment for the next 3,000 years we could come back and finish what we started, but we will not. Because killing you would end your punishment, and you deserve to be punished for a very long time. The broadcast ended. The screens went dark. The single human ship turned and jumped away into faster than light travel, disappearing as quietly as it had arrived. For a long moment no one in the military headquarters spoke. They stood in silence, staring at the blank screens, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Cathari was the first to move. He grabbed the communication device and began issuing orders. Find that ship, track its course. I want to know where it went and get our engineers working on reversing whatever the humans did to our systems. There must be a way to fix this. Officers scrambled to obey, grateful for something to do, but Verthan remained still, watching the chaos with tired eyes. It will not help, he said quietly. Cavari spun to face him. What? Finding the ship will not help. It is one of thousands. Fixing our systems will not help. The humans can simply do it again. Fighting back will not help. We have nothing to fight with. Then what do you suggest? Kiri demanded. That we simply accept this. That we bow down to these creatures. I suggest that we acknowledge reality. Varen replied. We attacked a human colony. We killed their children. We boasted about it to the galaxy. And now we are facing the consequences. He looked out the window at the city. Beyond, somewhere out there, billions of Villanexi were learning the same lesson. The humans could have destroyed us. They had the power. They had the opportunity. They chose not to. Perhaps that means something. Perhaps there is still a chance to limit the damage if we handle this wisely. Handle it wisely. Kavari's voice rose to a shout. They have crippled us. They have humiliated us. They are demanding 3,000 years of penance. How do you handle that wisely? By not making it worse, Berthan said. Simply across the galaxy, the news of what had happened to the Villini spread. Quickly, every species learned that human ships had entered and left Valency space without being detected. Every species learned that the entire Violini military had been rendered helpless in an instant. The implications were terrifying. If the humans could do this to the Valency, they could do it to anyone. No one was safe. No defensive system was secure. The humans had been living peacefully among them for centuries, and in that time they had apparently been studying every species, learning every weakness, preparing for a day that might never come. That day had come. The Galactic Concord convened an emergency session. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every member species. Fear hung in the air. Like smoke, the Lithori presided over the meeting. The ancient being looked even older than usual. Its crystal body seemed dimmer, as if the events of recent months had drained something essential from it. We have received a communication from the humans, though. Authority announced they wish to address this council. I have agreed to allow this. The massive screens in the hall activated. A human appeared. She was middle-aged with gray in her hair and lines on her face. She wore simple clothing, nothing that indicated rank or authority. She could have been anyone's mother, anyone's neighbor, anyone's friend. My name is Sarah Chun, she said. I have been asked to speak for humanity. Today the council waited. We have taken action against the Valanxi Dominion. You have all seen the results. Some of you are afraid that you might be next. I'm here to tell you that this fear is reasonable but also manageable. She folded her hands in front of her. We are not conquerors. We have no desire to rule the galaxy. We do not want your worlds, your resources, or your submission. We want only to be left in peace. For centuries we have lived quietly among you. We have traded fairly. We have shared knowledge freely. We have asked for nothing but the chance to exist. Her eyes seemed to look at each representative individually. Vesper 7 was a test, not our test. Yours. You watched as one of your members attacked a civilian colony. You watched as children were killed. Some of you sent diplomatic protests. Some of you expressed concern, but none of you did anything to stop it or punish those responsible. A murmur ran through the hall. We understand why the violin are powerful. You were afraid of them, but now you have learned something important. You should have been afraid of us. Sarah Chun leaned forward slightly. Here is what will happen now. The Valanxi Dominion will live with the consequences of its actions. We will maintain a presence in their space to ensure they do not rebuild their military capability. This will continue for 3,247 years, 1 year for each life they took. She paused. Any species that aids the Valanxi in circumventing this punishment will be treated as accomplices. Any species that attacks human territory or human citizens will receive the same treatment the violin have received. We do not seek conflict, but we will not avoid it either. The murmur grew louder. And for those who helped the Valanxi, who provided intelligence, funding, political cover, or other support for the attack on Vesper 7, we have a separate message. Her voice remained calm, but something in her eyes grew harder. We know who you are. We have records. We have proof. We will be sending representatives to discuss how you plan to acknowledge your role in the deaths of our people. I strongly suggest that when our representatives arrive, you receive them with honesty and cooperation. The broadcast ended in the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord. Representatives of a dozen species sat in stunned silence. Some of them had indeed supported Kithvari's actions. Some had thought that a firm hand against the humans would benefit everyone. Some had simply looked the other way, assuming that what happened to a small human colony did not concern them. Now they understood how wrong they had been. The Lithori rose from its seat. His voice was heavy with something that might have been satisfaction or might have been sorrow. The humans have spoken. I believe they mean exactly what they say. Those of you who were involved in the Vesper 7, Attack would be wise to consider your options carefully, the ancient being. Turn to leave, the council is adjourned. I suspect we will all have much to discuss in the days to come, as the representatives filed out, each lost in their own thoughts. One thing was clear, the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had proven something that the elders had always known. But the younger races had forgotten. Some species should not be provoked, not because they were aggressive, not because they were violent, but because when they finally chose to act, nothing could stop them. The Volanaxi had learned this lesson. The rest of the galaxy was learning it now, and somewhere in human space, the families of 3,247 victims watched the broadcasts and nodded quietly. It was not enough. Nothing would ever be enough, but it was a start. Justice would be slow. Justice would be patient. Justice would be complete. The humans had waited 6 months to respond to the attack on Mesper 7. They would wait 3,000 years to finish their response. They had time, they had patience, and they had memories that would never ever forget. The galaxy watched. There was nothing else to do. Human ships appeared around every Valenagi world within a week of Sarah Chun's broadcast. Not warships, or at least they did not look like warships. Small vessels, each crew by only a handful of humans. They took up positions in orbit and simply stayed there. They did not attack. They did not threaten. They did not demand anything. They just watched. Every day, Vailni citizens looked up at the sky and saw those ships hanging there, silent, patient, waiting. Some tried to ignore them. They went about their daily lives as if nothing had changed. They told themselves that the humans were just trying to intimidate them, that eventually the humans would get bored and leave, that things would go back to normal. These people were wrong. A month after the human ships arrived, a Valency military governor named Frankener decided to test the situation. He commanded one of the outer colonies, a world far from the center of power. He had been quietly gathering resources and rebuilding a small fleet of warships, hoping to restore some measure of Violini military strength. He worked in secret. He used hidden facilities. He avoided all normal communication channels. He was certain that the humans could not know what he was doing. He was wrong about that too. One morning, Thraken awoke to find that his secret fleet no longer existed. The ships were still there, physically present in their hidden docks, but every single system had been disabled. Engines, weapons, life support, everything. They were dead. Metal useless for anything except scrap. There was no message, no warning, no explanation. The humans did not even acknowledge what they had done. They simply did it and went back to watching. Threen tried again a year later. He used different techniques, different facilities, different security protocols. The result was the same. His new fleet was disabled. Before it could ever leave dock, he tried a third time, a fourth time, a fifth. Each time, no matter how clever his precautions, the humans found out. Each time his work was undone with silent efficiency. Finally, Trekner gave up. He sent a message to the human ships orbiting his world. It contained only 3 words. How do you know? The response came within minutes. It was equally brief. We always know. After that, Tricker stopped trying. So did every other Velexi commander who had been working to restore their military Power, the lesson was clear. There was no hiding from the humans. There was no outsmarting them. There was only accepting the situation and living with it. The galaxy learned this lesson too. Species that had quietly supported the attack on Vesper 7 began receiving visits from human diplomats. The Mauric Empire was one of the first. They had provided intelligence to the Valency, information about human shipping routes and colony defenses. When Kithvari planned his attack, Mauric data had helped him choose the optimal time and approach. The Mauric Emperor was a creature of living flame, ancient and proud. He had ruled his empire for 3,000 years. He had seen dozens of species rise and fall. He had never bowed to anyone. When the human diplomatic ship arrived, he refused to receive them. He sent a message telling them to leave his space immediately. The humans did not leave. They did not respond to his message. They simply remained where they were, a single small ship hanging in orbit around the Mauric home world. After a week, the Emperor sent a fleet to drive them away. 50 warships, the pride of Morphic military power, moved to intercept the tiny human vessel. When the fleet arrived, the human ship was gone. The Emperor declared victory and ordered his ships to return home. They never made it. Every ship in the fleet experienced simultaneous engine failure. They drifted in space, unable to move, unable to call for help. Life support systems began to fail. Emergency procedures could not correct the problem. 50 ships, 10,000 crew members, all of them helpless. And the human ship reappeared. It moved slowly among the drifting Noric vessels. It did not fire. It did not gloat. It simply broadcast a message. Emperor Morax, you provided intelligence that helped kill 847 children. We are here to discuss how you will acknowledge this. If you refuse to meet with us again, your fleet will remain disabled until their life support fails completely. The choice is yours. The Emperor met with the human diplomats the next day. The humans did not demand much. They wanted a public statement acknowledging Mauric involvement in the Vesper 7 attack. They wanted reparations paid to a fund for the victims' families. They wanted a formal apology. The Emperor, who had never apologized for anything in 3,000 years, apologized. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Every species that had played a role in the attack was visited. Every one of them received the same choice: acknowledge what you did or face the consequences. None of them chose consequences twice. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kithvari had become a problem. After the initial shock wore off, the young politician tried to flee. He chartered a private ship and attempted to escape Vanaxi space. His plan was to reach neutral territory, find all ice, and organize resistance against the human occupation. He made it approximately 3 light years before his ship stopped working. When Valency authorities found the vessel, Cathari was still aboard. He was unharmed physically, but he was changed. The humans had left him in a small room with no controls, no entertainment, no way to mark the passage of time. Only feature was a screen that played an endless loop of images and information. The faces of every human killed on Vesper 7, their names, their ages, their histories, what they had dreamed of becoming, who had loved them, who missed them. Now 3 days, Katvari had spent 3 days alone with those faces, unable to sleep, unable to look away. When the Rescue team found him. He was sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, whispering names: Emma, Marcus, Sarah, David, Michael, Jennifer, over and over. Like a prayer, the doctor said he would recover. The damage was psychological, not physical. With time and treatment, he would be himself again, the human representative who met with Volexy. Officials had a different opinion. Ambassador Cathari will spend 3,247 years in that room, she said. 1 year for each life he ordered taken. Human medical technology will keep him alive and healthy for the duration. He will learn the name of every person he killed. He will understand what he took from the universe. The valency officials protested. This was torture, they said. This was cruel. This was inhumane. The human representative listened politely, then responded, "You are correct. It is cruel, but it is not torture. Torture serves no purpose except to cause pain. This serves a purpose." Cathvari ordered the deaths of 3,247 people because he thought their lives did not matter. He will spend 3,247 years learning that every single one of those lives mattered. That is not torture, that is education. She paused. You may also consider it merciful. We discussed several alternatives. This is the kindest option we could agree on. The Valent did not ask what the other options had been. Cathari was taken to a human facility somewhere in deep space. His location was not disclosed. His family was not allowed to visit. He would live for 32 centuries, surrounded by the faces of people he had never met, learning their names, their stories, their dreams. Some said this punishment was too harsh. Others said it was not harsh enough. The humans did not ask for opinions. The old soldier of Varen watched these events unfold with complicated feelings. He had tried to warn Cathvari. He had tried to prevent what was happening, but he had also followed orders. He had carried out the ambassador's commands. He was not innocent. When the human ship arrived to speak with him, he did not resist. The diplomat who met with him was a man roughly his own age. Human age was difficult for other species to judge, but Rothan estimated the man had seen at least 60 years. His eyes had the look of someone who had witnessed much and regretted some of it. You tried to stop him, the man said. It was not a question. I tried to warn him. Boring corrected. It is not the same thing. No, the man agreed. It is not, but it is something. They talked for several hours. The human asked about the attack, about Cathvari, about Violini culture and politics. Van answered honestly. He did not try to make excuses. At the end of the conversation, the human stood and offered his hand. Verdun had learned this human gesture. It was a sign of respect. You will not be punished, the man said. You followed orders, but you also resisted. You warned your superiors. You documented your objections. You did what you could within the limits of your position. Varen took the offered hand. What happens now to my people? You rebuild. You learn. You become better. We will be watching, but we will not interfere unless necessary. The Valency Dominion will survive. It will just be different. Different how? The human smiled. It was a sad smile. The smile of someone who had seen too much to find joy easily. You will learn to value life, all life, not just Valeni life. Your children will grow up knowing what happens when you treat other beings as worthless. They will not make the same mistake. He released Verthin's hand. That is the real punishment, General, not the military restrictions, not the economic penalties, not even what is happening to Cathvari. The real punishment is that every Velini for the next 100 generations will know what their ancestors did. They will carry that weight. They will be defined by it. Varen understood. In his culture, honor and reputation were everything. The shame of Vesper 7 would follow his people forever. Their descendants would still be apologizing for it long after everyone involved was dead. Is that just? He asked. The human considered the question carefully. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe not. Maybe collective guilt is unfair. Maybe punishing descendants for the crimes of ancestors is wrong. We have debated this among ourselves. We do not all agree. He looked out the window at the Velini home world below. But here is what I do know. If we simply destroyed your military and left, you would rebuild in 100 years, maybe 200. You would be exactly as you were before. Another ambitious politician would rise. Another attack would happen. The cycle would continue. He turned back to Verthin. This way the cycle breaks. Your children will grow up with the memory of what happened. They will teach their children. The lesson will be passed down not as hatred of humans but as understanding of what happens when you forget that other beings have value. The human moved toward the door. We do not enjoy this, General. We do not take pleasure in your suffering. We are doing what we believe is necessary to make sure nothing like Vesper 7 ever happens again. If we are wrong, history will judge us, but we are willing to accept that judgment. He left. Fzan remained alone with his thoughts for a long time. In the great hall of the Galactic Concord, the elders gathered to observe and record. This was their role now. They could not influence events. They could only witness and remember. The Lethori representatives spoke to the assembly. We have watched the humans respond to the attack on their colony. We have seen them defeat the Valinagi without fighting a single battle. We have seen them extract punishment without killing a single person. We have seen them reshape the political landscape of the galaxy without conquering a single world. The ancient being's crystal body flickered with inner light. The young ones among you asked why we feared a species with short lives and soft bodies. Now you understand. We feared them because they are patient. We feared them because they are thorough. We feared them because when they finally choose to act, nothing can stop them. The Lethori looked at each representative in turn. But there is something else you should understand. Something the old warnings do not mention. The humans are not just dangerous, they are also merciful. They could have destroyed the Valnic Sea. They chose not to. They could have taken revenge on every species that wronged them. They chose restraint. A pause. This is perhaps the most frightening thing of all. A species that is only dangerous can be defended against. A species that is dangerous and merciful cannot be predicted. You never know when they will strike and when they will forgive. You can only hope that you never give them reason to choose. The elders nodded slowly. The lesson was clear. The universe had changed, and somewhere in human space, the families of Vesper 7 continued their lives. They grieved, they remembered, they raised children who would grow up knowing that their lost relatives had not been forgotten. The dead could not be brought back, but they could be honored. They could be remembered. Their Names could echo through history, ensuring that what happened to them would never happen again. This was the human way, not destruction but memory, not revenge but justice. The galaxy was learning the difference. 100 years passed. Time moves differently when you live among the stars. A century is nothing to an ancient Lithari or a long-lived Valeni, but it is enough for changes to settle in, enough for new generations to grow up knowing nothing but the way things are now, enough for the galaxy to become something new. The old order had been built on power, military strength, determined who mattered and who did not. The species with the biggest ships and the most weapons made the rules. Everyone else followed or suffered the consequences. That order was dead. Valency dominion still existed, but it was no longer what it had been. The military restrictions remained in place. Human ships still orbited their worlds, still watching, still waiting. Young Valenacci grew up seeing those ships in the sky, knowing what they meant, knowing why they were there. The old soldier Varen had died 30 years after the reckoning. In his final years he'd become an unexpected figure. He traveled between Valanxy worlds, speaking to young people about what had happened, not defending the attack on Vesper 7, not excusing it, simply explaining. We thought we were strong, he would say. We thought strength meant we could do whatever we wanted. We were wrong. There is always someone stronger. There is always a consequence for cruelty. The humans taught us this. We should have learned it ourselves. His speeches were recorded. They were shown in schools. They became part of the curriculum that every vile child studied. Some of the older Voxy resented this. They thought it was humiliation, forcing their children to learn about their ancestors' crimes. They wanted to move on, to forget, to rebuild their pride. But the younger generation surprised everyone. They did not feel humiliated. They felt responsible. A young Velixy diplomat named Curl was one of the first to speak about this publicly. She was only 40 years old, born long after Vasperus 7, raised in the shadow of human ships. My grandfather supported the attack, she said in an interview that was broadcast across the galaxy. He did not fire the weapons, but he voted for the politicians who ordered it. He cheered when he heard the news. He thought the humans had learned their place. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When I was a child, I asked him about this. I asked how he could have supported something so terrible. He had no good answer. He said he did not know the humans were real to him. They were just an idea, a concept, a problem to be solved. He did not think about the children who would die. Kural looked directly at the camera. That is the lesson I learned from my grandfathers. Shame. Other beings are real. Their lives matter. Their children matter. When we forget this, when we treat them as problems instead of people, we become monsters. My grandfather was not a monster. He was an ordinary person who forgot a simple truth. I will not forget it. Her interview was watched by billions. It sparked conversations across the galaxy about guilt, responsibility, and the possibility of redemption. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kevar continued his punishment. Thought it had been 100 years. He had learned thousands of names. He knew the faces of every child who had died on Vasperus 7. He knew their favorite games, their dreams for the future, the last words they had spoken to their parents. Human medical technology kept him young. He would not age during his imprisonment, when he finally emerged in 3,000 years, he would be physically the same as when he entered, but mentally, spiritually, he was already a different person. The humans allowed occasional interviews with him. These were recorded and shared, though HFY had no control over when or how they were released. In one interview conducted 70 years into his punishment, he was asked if he regretted his actions. Regret is not a strong enough word, he said. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. I destroyed 3,247 universes. That is how I think of it. Now, every person is a universe unto themselves, a complete world of experiences, memories, hopes, fears. When you kill someone, you do not just end a life, you end a universe. He stared at something beyond the camera. I ended 847 of those universes before they even had a chance to grow. Children, they would have become scientists, artists, teachers, parents. They would have loved and been loved. They would have changed the galaxy in ways I cannot imagine, and I erased them because I wanted political power. Tears ran down his face. If I could go back, I would stop myself. I would grab that young, arrogant fool by the throat and shake him until he understood. But I cannot go back. I can only go forward. I can only learn every name, every face, every story. I can only carry them with me forever. Interview ended there. Some who watched it felt pity for HFY. Others felt he deserved every moment of his suffering. The humans did not comment. They simply continued his punishment as promised. Across the galaxy, the political landscape had changed in ways no one had predicted. The old hierarchies based on military might had crumbled. What good was a massive fleet if the humans could disable it without firing a shot? What good were powerful weapons if they could be turned to toys? Overnight, new forms of power emerged. Economic influence, scientific cooperation, cultural exchange. These were things the humans could not simply turn off. These were forms of strength that did not depend on the ability to destroy. The conquered adapted. Treaties were rewritten. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Species that had once threatened each other now found themselves working together, pooling resources, sharing knowledge. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still moments of tension. But the nature of those conflicts had changed. No one wanted to be the next villainy. No one wanted to attract human attention for the wrong reasons. The humans themselves had changed too. In the century since Vasperus 7, they had become more visible in galactic affairs, not dominant, not controlling, but present. Human diplomats served on major councils. Human scientists worked in research facilities across the galaxy. Human traders moved goods between star systems, but there was something different about them now. Other species could feel a before Vesper 7. Humans had been seen as soft, peaceful, almost passive. They smiled a lot. They made friends easily. They seemed to want nothing more than to get along with everyone. Now other species understood that this friendliness was a choice. The humans were friendly because they wanted to be, not because they had to be. Behind those smiles was something else, something patient and watchful, something that would never forget and never forgive. Unprovoked violence. Human philosopher named Marcus Webb wrote about this in a book that became widely read across the galaxy. We are not a warlike species by nature, he wrote. We prefer peace, we prefer cooperation, we prefer friendship, but we are capable of war. We are capable of destruction on a scale that would horrify most other species. We choose not to use this capability, not because we lack it, but because we believe there are better ways to solve problems. He continued, the lesson of Vaspera 7 is not that humans are dangerous. Every species is dangerous in certain circumstances. The lesson is that we have learned to control our danger. We have learned to channel it into response rather than aggression. We did not attack the Vanalaxi out of hatred or rage. We responded to an injustice with measured, appropriate consequences. This is maturity. This is civilization. This is what it means to be truly strong. The book was taught in schools across the galaxy. Young beings of every species studied it, discussed it, argued about it. Some thought Webb was arrogant, others thought he was wise. All of them thought about what he was saying. On the anniversary of Vaspera 7, something happened that no one had expected. The humans announced that they were building a memorial at the site of the destroyed colony. This was not surprising. What was surprising was the invitation they extended. Every species in the galaxy was invited to send representatives to the memorial dedication. Even the Valeni government debated for weeks whether to accept. Some thought it was a trap. Others thought it was a test. A few thought it might be genuine. Kural, the young diplomat, argued strongly for acceptance. If we refuse, we show that we have learned nothing, she said. If we accept, we show that we are ready to face what our people did. This is an opportunity, not a threat. Her arguments convinced the council. A delegation was selected. Kuravel would lead it. The memorial was beautiful in its simplicity. A garden had been planted where the colony once stood. Trees from a dozen worlds grew together there, different colors and shapes, creating something new, something that could only exist because beings from different species had worked together to create a dot. At the center of the garden was a wall. Carved into the wall were 3,247 names. Every person who had died, every universe that had been destroyed. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered before this wall. Humans stood beside Kredak. Morik stood beside Lithori, and at the front of the crowd stood the Viangi delegation, facing the names of the people their ancestors had killed. A human woman stepped forward to speak. She was old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with years, but her eyes were sharp and her voice was strong. My name is Maya Chun. 100 years ago, my mother Sarah Chun spoke to the Galactic Concord about what had happened. Here, she demanded justice, and justice was delivered. She passed away 20 years ago. I am here to speak in her place. She looked at the crowd at the gathering of beings from across the galaxy. My grandmother died on this moon. She was 53 years old. She was a teacher. She taught children how to read, how to think, how to dream. She was buried in the rubble of the school she loved. Maya Chan's voice did not waver. For a long time I hated the Violency. I grew up with that hatred. It kept me warm on cold nights. It gave me purpose when I felt lost. But as I grew older, I realized that my hatred was not honoring my grandmother's memory. She was a teacher. She believed in growth, learning and becoming better. If she were here today, she would not want me to hate. She turned to face the Vanxi delegation. You have come here today. You have traveled across the galaxy to stand before this wall and acknowledge what was done. This took courage. This took humility. This is exactly what my grandmother would have wanted. Maya Chan walked toward the Valenxi. The crowd parted to let her pass. She stopped in front of Kural. You were not born when this happened. You did not choose it. You did not support it, but you are here. You are facing it. That matters. She reached out and took the young diplomat's hand. The past cannot be changed. The dead cannot be brought back, but the future is still being written. We can write it together if you are willing, not as enemies, not as conquerors and conquered, but as beings who have learned from tragedy and chosen to become better. Kural felt tears on her face. She did not wipe them away. We are willing, she said. We are sorry. We will do better. The two women stood together before the wall of names. Around them, the representatives of 100 species watched in silence. Something was changing. Something was healing. Later, each representative placed a stone at the base of the memorial. It was a human tradition, a way of showing that someone had visited and remembered. By the end of the day, thousands of stones surrounded the wall of names. The Lethori representative was the last to place its stone. The ancient being had witnessed more history than any other living creature. It had seen empires rise and fall. It had watched civilizations destroy themselves. It had always believed that this was the nature of intelligent beings. They grew. They became powerful. They became arrogant. They fell. But watching the ceremony today, watching former enemies stand together in shared grief and hope, the Lethori felt something it had not felt in millennia. The possibility that things could be different. The possibility that beings could learn. When it returned to the conquered chambers, the Lethori added a final note to entry 7412. In the Book of Cautions, humans observe carefully, learn from them. They were patient until they were not. But when the storm passed, they helped rebuild what they had broken. They are not merely dangerous. They are something rarer, dangerous, and wise enough to know when to stop. The galaxy had been transformed, not by human weapons or human wrath, but by something subtler and more powerful, by the demonstration that strength without wisdom is meaningless, by the proof that even the deepest wounds can heal if both sides are willing to try. Ambassador Keith Vari continued his punishment in his distant prison. He had 3,000 more years to learn and to remember. Perhaps when he finally emerged, he too would understand what it meant to be truly strong. Perhaps he too would find redemption, or perhaps he would simply carry the names forever, a living memorial to those he had killed. Either way, his punishment served its purpose. Every being in the galaxy knew what had happened to him. Every ambitious politician, every arrogant general, every leader who might consider attacking civilian populations looked at Keith Var's fate and thought twice. The humans had not just punished one person. They had created a lesson that would last forever. On the former site of the Vesper 7 colony, the garden grew. Trees from 100 worlds reached toward the stars. Beings of every species came to walk among them, to read the names on the wall, to remember. And on quiet evenings, when the twin moons rose over the garden, some visitors claimed they could hear children laughing, not ghosts, not spirits but echoes of all the children who had been born across the galaxy since that terrible day. Children who would grow up in a universe transformed by tragedy into something better. This was the true legacy of Vesper 7, not the death, not the punishment, not the fear. The legacy was the world that came after, a world where every life mattered, a world where strength was measured not in weapons but in wisdom, a world where former enemies could stand together and choose a different path. The elders had cautioned never to provoke humans. They had been right, but also incomplete. The full truth was more complicated. Humans could be terrible. Their anger, they could be relentless in. Their justice, they could be patient beyond all understanding. These things made them dangerous, but humans could also be forgiving. They could extend hands in friendship to those who had wronged them. They could help rebuild what their enemies had broken. These things made them remarkable. The galaxy had learned both lessons. 100 years after Vesper 7, a valency child asked her grandmother about the human ships in the sky. Why are they still there? The child asked. The bad thing happened so long ago. Grandmother thought for a moment before answering. They are there to remind us. She said, not to punish us, not anymore, but to remind us that our actions have consequences, that when we hurt others, we hurt ourselves, that the only way forward is together. The child looked up at the distant ships, tiny points of light against the stars. Do you think they will ever leave someday? The grandmother said, when we have truly learned, when we no longer need the reminder. How will they know when that is? The grandmother smiled. I think they will know. Humans are very good at understanding us, sometimes better than we understand ourselves. The child nodded, accepting this answer with the simple faith of the young. She went back to playing the human ships already forgot, but a grandmother continued to watch the sky for a long time. She remembered the stories her own grandmother had told her about the time before, about the attack, about the response, about the long years of learning and growing. Her people had done a terrible thing. They had paid a heavy price, but they had also changed. Slowly, painfully, one generation at a time, they had become something better. And somewhere out there in their small ships, the humans were watching, waiting, hoping. The galaxy had been transformed. The children of those who had made war were now making peace. The lessons of Vesper 7 had been learned. The elders had been right to warn against provoking humans, but they had not known the full truth. Humans were not just dangerous, they were teachers, and the galaxy was finally ready to learn. The memorial garden grew. The names on the wall were read and remembered. The stones at its base multiplied with each passing year. And across the galaxy, beings of every species looked at each other with new eyes, not as enemies, not as resources to be exploited, but as fellow travelers on a long journey towards something better. This was the world the humans had created, not through conquest, not through destruction, but through patient, relentless, compassionate transformation. The elders had cautioned never to provoke humans. Now the galaxy understood why, and they were grateful.